Have you ever wondered what it's like to live the dream as a GP in Australia? Well, join me as we unveil the 3 main reasons why GPs are falling in love with this land down under. And this is 6 months into my own personal journey as a GP in Australia. Get ready to be inspired and super jealous at the same time. But be warned, there will be a video that details the 3 main reasons why you actually wouldn't want to come to Australia to work as a GP. But for now, why don't we just stay positive? Now, this is a video that details my own personal experience of being here. And so people may have had different experiences so far. But finally, personal circumstances may differ. So don't jump ship just based on this one video. Reason number 1 is a work-life balance. Now, any GP that's working here in Australia will by and large tell you that it is very easy to get a good work-life balance. And that comes from the way GPs work in Australia. Pretty much every GP in Australia is a contractor. So what that basically means is that you decide when you want to work and you decide how many hours you want to work and you decide the hours you want to work. And if you only want to work 10 hours a week, well, then you'll only work 10 hours a week, but you'll also only make money for 10 hours a week. And similarly, you can decide how many patients you want to see per hour because you don't have a salary as such. Every time you see a patient, depending on how long that consultation lasted, you bill a certain number to Medicare. And we'll definitely talk about Medicare in a lot more detail because that was something that was completely foreign to me. And it's probably foreign to a lot of doctors who are used to the salaried model where you get paid by the hour. And so if you want to get through a lot of patients, well, you can. I know there are some GPs out there that do 6-7 patients an hour. Although if you want to spend a little bit more time with your patients and provide what I would consider probably better quality care, then most GPs are probably seeing 3 to 4 patients an hour. And so something that I've worked out myself, and I know a lot of my other fellow GPs have worked out, is how much money do I need to make a month? And then based on that, you just calculate how many hours you want to work and then how many patients you want to see per hour. And if you're lucky, you're in a busy practice that has a really good reputation, or you have your own personal reputation and people want to come and see you, then you can pretty much set the hours that you want because your appointments will fill up. So it is super common for people to just work within those school hours between drop-off and pickup. But at the same time, there are a lot of GPs that will choose only to work the evenings. The way it works at the practice that I'm working in at the moment, I pretty much just write to the practice manager the hours that I want to work throughout the day, and I try to coordinate that with pickups and drop-offs and my partner's work as well. And that's been working out really well for me. Similarly, if you want to work weekends, you can work weekends. There's plenty of work, but if you don't want to, you don't really have to. Although some practice owners and practice managers will try to encourage you to do weekends, or your contract potentially might stipulate that you have to do 1 in 4 or 1 in 5. Realistically, if you're a good GP, people like you, your books are full, you can decide you don't want to do weekends. And that's pretty much the end of that discussion. I feel like we're going to be talking a lot about how things are different here in Australia than in the UK, where I used to work as a GP, and I had been working there for the last 6 years. And I guess the way to summarize this very quickly, and this is something that I picked up from a magazine called The Medical Republic. If you think who is your customer as a practice, you actually might be mistaken into thinking that your customers are your patients, but your customers are actually not your patients. Your customers as a practice are the other GPs, because the GPs are the people that are bringing in the money. So if you want your customers to be happy, you pretty much want your GPs to be happy. And to make your GPs happy, so just make sure they have a really good work-life balance. So let me give you a quick example. I found out a week in advance that I really need to be somewhere on Friday at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And I generally work long days on Fridays because there is that demand. And so essentially what I did is I went to the practice manager and said, listen, I'm really sorry. I just need Friday off. And the answer was no problem, which is absolutely crazy because coming from the UK where you're a salaried doctor and you have your set hours that you have to work, if you want to ask for Friday afternoon off, you'll pretty much have to sell your kidney. Well, you need to find someone that's going to cover that shift for you. Because in the UK, there's that obligation to provide care between 8 o'clock and 6:30, Monday to Friday. And so if you're that doctor providing care, then you can't just shut the practice. And so that work-life balance effectively comes from GPs having a lot of control over their clinics, start-stop times, how many patients they want to see, and how many hours they want to work in a day. Reason number 2 is there are a lot of professional development opportunities. I find the big difference between working here as a GP in Australia rather than in the UK is that in Australia, there is this assumption of competence. And so if you want to do something, well, you're a doctor, you know whether you can or can't do it. You don't need a special certificate or a form or a course. You can just go ahead and start doing it. And so a good example is skin cancer medicine. There are just so many skin cancers in Australia. It's just crazy. And obviously that's because there's just so much sun. And then that will kind of feed into reason number 3 why it's really great to be in Australia. And so it would be impossible for dermatologists, for skin specialists, to have to see all of the potentially malignant skin lesions that patients have. And so by default, most GPs do some skin work. Again, we talked about reason one, that work-life balance, where you have a lot of control over your clinics. If you don't like skin work, you can actually decide, I don't want to do skin work. But if you do, you just advertise yourself as a skin cancer doctor. What I've personally noticed here working as a GP in Australia is that a lot of GPs have special interests. And a good example is skin cancer that we spoke about. There are GP obstetricians. I have no idea why you would want to be a GP obstetrician. Just sounds like the worst thing ever. Again, because there are so many rural areas in Australia, you can't just fly obstetricians, 5 hours inland. And we're just talking about Western Australia here to service, 100 or 200 people. You have effectively GPs that are jacks of all trades, that can deliver babies, that can fix broken bones, that can cut out skin cancers. And so feeding into that, rural medicine is a really interesting career pathway if you're kind of driven that way and if you like that ultimate doctor experience. This probably isn't something that I'm going to be doing anytime soon because it just sounds really, really scary. But I know a lot of GPs do go into rural medicine, firstly for the challenge, for the experience, and also for the money, because there obviously needs to be some kind of financial incentive for GPs to travel so far. And the cool thing about these professional development opportunities is that you can really dabble into things that you wouldn't normally dabble, for instance, in the UK. Coming here to Australia, I realized that medicinal cannabis is something that a lot of GPs are prescribing, and that's something that I started developing an interest in. Now, the way that I did that was I did actually do a few courses, and I did join a community of GPs to discuss cases because there are no official guidelines for this. But 6 months in, it's been a really interesting experience of prescribing medicinal cannabis. There are plenty of other special interests that GPs have here in Australia. For instance, lifestyle medicine, transgender health, you can be a surgical assistant if you want, which can actually be quite lucrative. And there are even GP anesthetists. And again, the reason why this is happening is because Australia is vast, and essentially you need doctors that can do a lot of things rather than specialists that have really narrow interests. So I find that has been something that has been really, really cool. Now, reason number 3 is pretty obvious, and that is lifestyle. I mean, Australia is absolutely stunning. So we are living in Perth at the moment, and we had the choice to go wherever we wanted to, because again, as a GP, you're pretty much needed everywhere. And so the main places that we were looking at were Perth, Brisbane, Melbourne, Sydney, potentially Adelaide. And the reason why we chose Perth was because we spent the last 13 years in Manchester. And I'm not from Manchester originally, so I just never got used to the weather there. I feel like in Perth, the weather is the exact opposite of Manchester's. It's super sunny and it's really dry. And we have these beautiful, pristine beaches here, like nothing I've ever seen in my life. And to emphasize the point of how beautiful these beaches are, and one day we decided, you know what, let's do something good for the environment. And what we did is we went to the beach with a bag thinking, let's pick up some trash from the beach. And we spent an hour walking up and down the beach and we barely picked anything, to be honest. And why I think that happens is when you're surrounded with places that are clean, I think it would just really stand out if you leave like wrapping paper or chewing gum on the sidewalk. And then personally, I've not really shared this before, but I really got into surfing last time I was here in Australia. And so I'm not exaggerating by saying that I will wake up in the morning, go surfing, shower on the beach, get into my scrubs, and then do my clinic. Sometimes I catch myself thinking, I can't believe people live like this, and I can't believe that I can live like this, right? Again, this might not be for everyone. So Australia, and specifically Perth, these are great places to spend a lot of time outdoors. Surfing, cycling, running, watching the sunsets on the beach. They're absolutely amazing because this is on the West Coast. And I recognize that some people might actually not want that. I personally have met some people that when I told them I spent the last 13 years in Manchester, were like, oh my God, we're so jealous. That must have been so amazing. And when I asked them a little bit more about why, they were saying, because there are all these museums and shows and cultures and things. And when I asked them, well, what about the beaches and the surfing and the swimming? Well, they told me, you know what, we don't really like the beach. We're not very sporty. We don't like to be outdoors. And so I can appreciate that the lifestyle is something that some people may like, but something that you may not like. I'm mindful that we're kind of crossing into the 3 reasons why you wouldn't want to come to Australia, but I'll leave that for the other video. And so in this last reason number 3, lifestyle, you're kind of incorporating reason number 1 as well. So for instance, if you want to go whale watching in Albany, which we did, which was just absolutely amazing. I mean, just take a week off when the whales are migrating. If you want to swim with whale sharks in Exmouth, which is in the north of Western Australia, again, you just choose that week that you want to have off and then you just go. Now, obviously, unless you're extremely established as a GP, you can't really be that reckless with taking the afternoon off or the day off here or there without much notice. I mean, if you really want to cancel your clinic because, say, for instance, you want to go surfing because the waves are awesome, then the receptionist will move your patients over. However, I imagine if you do that a lot without prior warning, people will just get a bit cheesed off with you. So I guess that's just something to bear in mind. But again, if you plan things well, on your days off, you can really have some absolutely stunning days off. Right, well, if you have recently moved to Australia, let me know if you feel that these 3 reasons are the same reasons that you came over to Australia. And if you are wondering whether you should or not, and you're kind of more of a glass half empty person, here's the video where you can learn about the 3 reasons why you won't want to come to Australia. And a little spoiler is that one of them is that everything wants to kill you here. All right, well, I'll see you in the next one.